2. An opportune moment. Father Paisi was not, of course, wrong when he decided that his dear boy would come back and perhaps, even though not entirely, but perspicaciously all the same, penetrated into the real meaning of Alyosha's state of mind. Nevertheless, I frankly confess that I myself would find it very hard to explain the true significance of that strange, obscure moment in the life of the hero of my story, who is so young and whom I love so much. To Father Paisi's sorrowful question addressed to Alyosha, "Are you too with the men of little faith?" I could, of course, reply firmly for Alyosha, "No, he is not with those of little faith." Moreover, it was quite the opposite. All his confusion arose from the fact that he was of great faith. But there was confusion. It had arisen in spite of everything, and it was so painful that long afterwards Alyosha thought of that sorrowful day as one of the most painful and fateful days of his life. If, however, I were to be asked frankly, could all this distress and so great an anxiety have arisen in him simply because the elder's body, instead of beginning at once to exercise healing powers, was on the contrary showing signs of early decomposition? I should reply without a moment's hesitation, yes, it certainly was so. I would only like to ask my readers not to be in too great a hurry to laugh at my young hero's pure heart. For my part, far from intending to apologize for him or accuse and justify his unsophisticated faith on the ground of his youth, or, for instance, the little progress he had made in his studies, etc., etc., I must, on the contrary, declare emphatically that I have genuine respect for the qualities of his heart. No doubt, some other youth who responded cautiously to heartfelt impressions, who knew how to love not passionately but lukewarmly, whose mind, though reliable, was a little too reasonable for his age and therefore cheap, such a youth, I say, would have avoided what happened to my hero. But as a matter of fact, in some cases, it really is much more admirable to give way to an emotion, however unreasonable, which springs from a great love, than not to give way to it at all. And that is all the more so when one is young, for a youth who is invariably reasonable does not inspire much confidence and isn't worth much. That's my opinion. But sensible people will perhaps exclaim, surely not every young man can be expected to believe in such prejudices, and your young man is no authority for others. To this I reply again, yes, my young man had faith, and his faith was firm and inviolate, but still I am not going to apologize for him. You see, though I declared above, and perhaps a little too hastily, that I was not going to explain, justify, or apologize for my hero, I feel that something has to be made clear for the understanding of the rest of my story. That what I will say is that there is no question of miracles. There was no frivolously impatient expectation of miracles here. It was not for the triumph of his convictions that Alyosha needed any miracles at the time. That was certainly not so. It was not because of some former preconceived idea which he was anxious to triumph over some other idea. Oh no, not at all. What he was concerned about here, first and foremost, was a person, and only a person, the person of his beloved elder, the person of the righteous man whom who whom he revered to the point of adoration. The real trouble was that all the love hidden in his young and pure heart for everyone and everything seemed at that time during the whole of the preceding year to have been at times entirely concentrated and perhaps wrongly on one human being only, at least in the strongest impulses of his heart, namely on his beloved elder, now dead. It is true that that being had so long being it is true that being had so long been regarded by him as an indisputable ideal that all his youthful powers and all their aspirations could not be directed exclusively towards that ideal, at moments even to the forgetting of everyone and everything. He remembered afterwards that on that painful day he had completely forgotten his brother Dmitri, about whom he was so worried and whom he had so longed to see the day before. He had also forgotten to take the 200 rubles to little Ilya's father, which he had intended to do so early also on the previous day. But again, it was not miracles that he needed, but only higher justice, which, according to his belief, had been violated, and it was this that dealt such a sudden and cruel blow to his heart. And what doesn't matter that this justice had, in Alyosha's expectations, inevitably assumed the form of miracles to be performed immediately by the dust of his former beloved guide. Did not everyone in the monastery, even those whose intellects Alyosha admired, even Father Paisi himself, think and hope for the same thing? And so Alyosha, untroubled by any doubts, clothed his dreams in the same form as all the rest. Besides, all this had taken shape in his heart long since, during the whole year of his life in the monastery, and his heart had got into the habit of expecting it. But it was justice, justice that he hungered for, and not only miracles. And now the man who, according to his expectations, ought to have been raised above everyone else in the whole world, that very man, instead of receiving the glory that was his due, was suddenly cast down and disgraced. What for? Who had judged him? Who could have decreed it? Those were the questions that all at once wrung his inexperienced and virginal heart. He could not bear without mortification, without bitterness, even that the most righteous of the righteous should have been exposed to such jeering and spiteful mockery of a crowd so thoughtless and so inferior to him. All right, even had there been no miracles, even had nothing wondered, or even had nothing wonderful occurred, and had his immediate expectations not been justified, but why should this indignity have happened? Why should this disgrace have been permitted? Why this premature decomposition, which was a violation of the laws of nature, as the spiteful monks said? Why this sign, which they were now so triumphantly pointing at together with Father Ferapont, and why did they believe that they had right to point at it? Where was Providence and its finger? Why did it hide its finger at the most critical moment? Thought Alyosha, and seemed to be anxious itself to submit to the blind, dumb, and pitiless laws of nature. That was why Alyosha's heart was bleeding, and of course, as I have said already, What he was concerned about, first and foremost, was that the person he had loved more than anything in the world should be dishonored and disgraced. Granted that my young hero's complaint was thoughtless and unreasonable, but again, I repeat for the third time, and I am quite prepared to admit that my argument too is perhaps far from sound. I'm glad my young hero did not turn out to be so reasonable at such a moment, for a man who is not a fool will have time enough to see reason. But if there is no love in a young man's heart at such an exceptional moment, then when will it come? I must not, however, forget to mention in this connection another strange fact which, though only for a fraction of a second, occurred to Alyosha at that fatal and confused moment. This new something that flashed through Alyosha's mind was the somewhat painful impression left by his conversation with Ivan the day before, which kept recurring to him again and again now. Yes, even now. Oh, not that any of the fundamental and, as it were, elemental beliefs of his soul had in any way been shaken. He loved his God and believed in him firmly, though he did murmur against him suddenly. Yet a sort of vague but tormenting and evil impression left by his conversation with Ivan the day before again suddenly stirred in his mind and was demanding more and more insistently to come to the surface. It was beginning to get dark when Rakitin, who was on his way through the pine wood from the hermitage to the monastery, suddenly caught sight of Alyosha lying motionless and apparently asleep under a tree with his face downwards on the ground. He went up and called him by name. Is that you, Alexei? Good Lord. Have you? He said in surprise, but stopped without finishing. He wanted to say, have you come to this? Alyosha did not look up at him, but from a slight movement Rakitin at once realized that he heard and understood him. What's the matter with you? He went on in a surprised tone of voice, but his surprise was already given way to a smile which was becoming more and more sarcastic. Listen, I've been looking for you for over 2 hours. You suddenly disappeared. But what are you doing here? What sort of stupid nonsense is this? You might look at me at least. Alyosha raised his head, sat up, and leaned with his back against the tree. He was not crying, but there was a look of suffering and irritation on his face. He did not look at Rakitin, however, but somewhere away from him. You know, your face is quite changed. No more of that famous meekness of yours in it. Not angry with someone, are you? Have they hurt your feelings? Leave me alone, Alyosha said suddenly, still without looking at him, with a weary wave of the hand. Oh ho, so that's how we are. Started shouting at people like other mortals, have you? And one of our angels too. Well, Alyosha, old man, you have surprised me, you know. I mean it. It's a long time since I was surprised at anything here. You see, I've always looked upon you as an educated chap. Alyosha looked at him at last, but somehow absent-mindedly, as though he still scarcely understood what he was talking about. But surely you're not so upset because your old man is stinking the place out. You didn't seriously believe that he'd start pulling miracles out of the air, Rakitin exclaimed, looking genuinely astonished again. I do believe, and I want to believe, Alyosha cried irritably. What more do you want? Nothing at all, my dear friend. But damn it all, a 13-year-old schoolboy doesn't believe in that now. Still, damn it. So you're angry with your God now, are you? Up in arms because he hasn't been promoted, that his name hasn't appeared in the honors list. Oh, you fools. Alyosha screwed up his eyes, gave Rakitin a long look. There was an angry flash in his eyes, but it was not Rakitin he was angry with. I haven't taken up arms against God, he said, with a sudden wry smile. I simply don't accept his world. You don't accept his world? What do you mean? Rakitin asked, thinking over his answer for a moment. What rot is this? Alyosha did not reply. Well, enough of this nonsense. Now to business. Have you had anything to eat today? I don't remember. I think I have. I can see by your face that you need something to eat. One can't help feeling sorry for you. You didn't sleep last night either, did you? I understand you had a conference in there, and then all that silly rumpus. I expect all you had was a I expect all you had was a bite of holy bread. I've got some sausage in my pocket. Brought it from the town just in case I felt hungry on my way here. Only you won't eat sausage, will you? Let's have it. Oh ho, so that's what you're like now. Open rebellion, I see. Barricades. Well, old man, we mustn't miss such a chance, must we? Come to my place. I'd be glad of a drop of vodka myself now. I'm dog tired. I don't suppose you'd agree to have a little vodka, or would you? Let's have vodka too. Dear me, well, well. Rakitin gave him a queer look. Well, one way or another, vodka or sausage, it's a damn good chance, and we mustn't miss it, must we? Come along. Alyosha got up in silence and followed Rakitin. If that dear little brother of yours, Ivan, could see it, he'd certainly have the surprise of his life. By the way, your brother Ivan went off to Moscow this morning. Do you know that? Yes, Alyosha replied apathetically, and suddenly his brother Dmitri's face flashed through his mind, but only for a fraction of a second, and though it did remind him of something, of some urgent business which must not be put off for a moment, some duty, some terrible obligation, this reminder made no impression on him, did not reach his heart, and immediately slipped his memory and was forgotten. But Alyosha remembered this long afterwards. Dear old Ivan delivered himself of a remark about me one day, to the effect that I was a third rate liberal windbag, and on one occasion you too could not resist pointing out to me that I was dishonest. All right, let's see what your great gifts and honesty will do for you now, Rakitin concluded in an undertone to himself. Oh hell, listen, he said aloud. Don't let's go through the monastery. Let's take this path straight to town. As a matter of fact, I ought really to go round to Mrs. Kochlakov's. You see, I've written to tell her about everything that happened, and she at once sent me a little note in pencil. She simply adores writing notes, the dear lady does. That she never expected such conduct from such a highly respected elder as Father Zosima. That was the very word she used, conduct. She too got very angry. Oh, what a lot of fools you all are. Wait, he suddenly cried again, stopping and taking Alyosha by the shoulder. Made him stop too. Do you know Alyosha, old man? He said, looking searchingly into his eyes, completely under the impression of a new idea which dawned upon him suddenly. And though he was laughing outwardly, he seemed to be afraid of uttering this new sudden idea of his. aloud. So hard did he still find it to believe the strange and unexpected mood in which he saw Alyosha now. Do you know, Alyosha, old man, where we'd better go now? He said at last timidly and ingratiatingly. I don't care, anywhere you like. Let's go to Grushenka, eh? Will you come? Rakitin said at last, trembling all over with timid suspense. Let's go to Grushenka. Alyosha replied at once calmly, and his prompt and calm agreement was so unexpected that Rakitin nearly started back. Well, I must say, he cried in amazement, but all of a sudden, seizing Alyosha firmly by the arm, he dragged him quickly along the path, still terribly afraid that his resolution might falter. They walked along in silence, Rakitin being afraid even to utter a word. You can't imagine how glad she'll be, how awfully glad, he muttered, but again fell silent. And indeed, it was not to please Grushenka that he was dragging Alyosha to her. He was a serious minded man and never understood anything without advantage to himself. He had two things in mind now. First, a wish to revenge himself on Alyosha, that is to say, to see the disgrace of the righteous one, and probably the downfall of Alyosha from the saints to the sinners, a prospect he was already gloating over. And secondly, he had in view a certain material advantage to himself, of which more later. So he thought to himself gaily and spitefully, the opportune moment has come, and we shall jolly well catch it by the scruff of its neck. That moment, I mean, for it's certainly opportune for us.